Quantum physics has proven something that will change the way you see every second of your life. The observer does not watch reality. The observer creates it. This is not speculative philosophy. It is the result of the most replicated experiments in the history of modern science. When an electron is observed, it stops existing as a wave of possibility and collapses into a defined position. When no one observes it, it remains in superposition in all places at the same time as pure potential. The presence of the observer is the trigger that transforms possibility into reality. Now place yourself into this equation. You are seeing this because something is changing at the level of your consciousness, and that change is making it impossible to keep operating as if you were a passive spectator of your own life. You've felt this. The growing intolerance for circumstances you once accepted. The sense that your choices carry a weight they didn't have before. The increasingly frequent perception that what you focus your attention on expands, while what you ignore withers. You are not imagining this. You are detecting the real mechanism of reality. The journey that brought you here has a specific texture. You tried to change circumstances directly. Some shifted, others resisted with a stubbornness that made no sense. You worked on positive thinking, and it worked sometimes in ways that were neither predictable nor consistently repeatable. You developed awareness of your patterns, and that awareness brought clarity, but not always automatic change. At some point, you began to suspect that there is a deeper layer that none of these approaches could reach. A layer where change happens in a way that direct effort does not produce, but that is also not passivity. It is a third thing, more precise than anything you've had words to describe. You are not going to learn how to use your consciousness as a tool here. You are going to recognize that your consciousness is already an active observer, already collapsing possibilities into reality at every moment, and that the difference between a life you build and a life that happens to you is simply the difference between a conscious observer and an unconscious one. This is the exact moment for that recognition. The growing sense that your choices carry weight is the field responding to the expansion of your consciousness, confirming that the mechanism is active and that you are reaching the point of operating it deliberately. Leaving before the end would be like stopping at the threshold of understanding something that will completely reorganize your relationship with the power you have over your own experience. Less than 1% of people understand what the observer effect really implies for everyday life. Most read about it as a scientific curiosity and move on. You are here because you intuitively sense that it implies much more than curiosity. And there is a paradox that will fully reveal itself only at the end. The most powerful observer is not the one who looks with the most intensity. It is the one who learns to look in a specific way, and that way is not what you probably imagine. But before understanding what is being activated, we need to look at what has always prevented you from operating as a conscious observer. The most common behavior of those who discover the observer effect is to try to control what they observe. You try to direct your attention only toward what you want to manifest. You try to avoid thinking about what you don't want. You monitor your thoughts, watch your emotions, try to maintain focus on desired outcomes with a discipline that turns into constant vigilance. And then you feel exhausted, guilty when unwanted thoughts appear, and frustrated because results don't come with the consistency your effort should produce. This is not a lack of commitment. It is the wrong method applied to the right mechanism. The problem is that you are trying to control the content of observation, what you think, what you feel, what you see. And the observer effect does not respond to the content of observation. It responds to the quality of the observer, to the depth of presence of the one who is looking, to the level of consciousness from which the observation happens. The counterintuitive reversal is this: you do not direct reality by controlling what you think. You direct it by changing the quality of the one who is thinking. The difference between a controlling observer and a conscious observer is total. The controller uses attention as force, trying to push reality toward what they want through the weight of concentrated thought. The conscious observer uses attention as light, illuminating precisely what they choose to see, and the field collapses around that illumination naturally, without force. The quantum field does not obey the force of intention. It responds to the coherence of the observer. And coherence is not produced by the effort of control. It is produced by the quality of presence, by the clarity of who you are when you observe, not by the intensity of what you are trying to observe. Think of the sun. Sunlight does not force plants to grow. It offers the condition, and the plant responds naturally in the way it needs. You tried to be both the sun and the plant, generating the light and controlling how the plant uses it. The observer effect asks something different. Be the sun. Let the field be the plant. But here is what most people stop listening to. And this is exactly what changes everything. The observer effect is not a spiritual principle dressed up in scientific language. It is the concrete result of decades of experimentation in physics laboratories around the world. And its implication for human experience is more radical than physics has officially declared, but something every great physicist who studied it has felt as inevitable. The mechanism is this. Before being observed, a particle exists as a wave function, a mathematical distribution of probabilities. It can be in multiple places at once, in multiple states at once, with multiple values of any property you want to measure. When the observer measures, when the observer's consciousness interacts with the system, the wave function collapses. Probability becomes certainty. Possibility becomes fact. Now expand this to the scale of your life. Your life, at any given moment, exists as a field of possibilities. Multiple paths available, multiple possible outcomes, multiple versions of what could happen next. What collapses these possibilities into a specific reality is the quality of your observation, the state of consciousness from which you perceive your current situation and imagine what comes next. Neuroplasticity documents the brain-related aspect of this process. The brain that consistently observes from a specific state of consciousness builds neural connections that make that state progressively more accessible and more stable, which in turn changes what the observer detects as possible, changing what they collapse as real. Think of a wave encountering a coral reef. The wave doesn't choose which part of the reef to illuminate, but the way it arrives completely determines what becomes visible. A calm wave reveals colors and shapes with precision. A turbulent wave reveals only turbulence. The quality of your consciousness when observing your life works exactly like this, not through the content of what you think, but through the quality of the state from which you think. Take a deep breath now. Exhale completely before inhaling again. And as the air comes in, notice the state from which you are observing this video right now. Not the content, the state. Is there openness or contraction? Curiosity or resistance? Hope or protective skepticism? That state, exactly that, is what the observer effect reads as the signal, not what you are thinking. How you are being while you think. The practical consequence is this. Changing what you observe without changing the state from which you observe does not produce consistent results. Changing the state from which you observe, even without changing the initial content of the observation, begins to reorganize what the field has available to collapse in your direction. But there is a specific obstacle that prevents most people from changing the state of the observer, and it has nothing to do with spirituality or practice. And when you truly understand this, you realize there is an obstacle no one talks about. What blocks you is not what you think. The obstacle is not a lack of clarity about what you want. It is the unconscious belief that what you want is not available to someone like you. This shows up in very specific ways you probably recognize. The tendency to visualize the desired outcome and then immediately mentally construct all the obstacles that make it unlikely. The feeling that things that came easily to you are different in nature from the things you truly want, that the latter require something the former didn't, and that this something is beyond your current reach. The way you can be enthusiastic about what is possible for others and cautious about what is possible for yourself. This pattern is not humility. It is the observer operating from a state that places you in the category of, this isn't for me the way it is for them. The fatal mistake in applying the observer effect is not observing the wrong things. It is observing from the wrong state. And the most common state is implicit exclusion, where you unconsciously position yourself outside the category of what you want to observe. The observer who positions themselves as a witness to what others have is not operating the observer effect in their favor. They are operating it against themselves, consistently collapsing the possibility, "this is for others," into reality, with the same precision and inevitability with which they could collapse, "this is for me." Your resistance to positioning yourself as the kind of person for whom what you desire is naturally available is not realism. It is the final guardian before the breakthrough, the state of implicit exclusion that the ego uses to protect itself from the disappointment that would come if you included yourself and didn't achieve it. This guardian has a flawless, protective logic. And that logic is exactly what keeps the collapse moving in the wrong direction. The difference between an excluding observer and an including observer is not arrogance versus humility. It is the state from which the field is observed. And the field responds to that state with the same neutrality that a camera responds to available light. No judgment, no preference, just a reflection of what is there. How do you move from implicit exclusion to natural inclusion without it feeling performative or forced? That is the loop that will remain open for a moment longer. Because the answer is simpler than you expect and more radical in its implications than any manifestation technique you've used. If you've made it this far, the observer in you is already more awake than when you began. This is not a metaphor. It's what happens when attention is intentionally directed toward the mechanism that governs it. So how do you cross this final guardian? Here is what changes everything. The solution is not to affirm that what you desire is for you. It is to change the point of observation. Affirming that something is for you while your internal state still operates from exclusion is like trying to paint over a wet wall. The paint won't stick because the surface isn't ready. The state must change first. And the state changes when you shift the position from which you observe, not what you observe. The instruction is this: choose something you desire that carries the state of implicit exclusion. Don't visualize having it. Observe from within. Instead of imagining the outcome as something outside of you waiting to be reached, place yourself inside the state that the person who already has that outcome naturally inhabits. Not the object, the state. Not "I have this," but what is it like to be someone for whom this is natural? The difference between visualization as a destination and observation as a state is total, and it is the difference the observer effect detects. The destination still places you outside of what you want, looking toward it. The state places you inside the frequency of someone who is already there, observing from the inside out. This does not require any formal practice. It requires that you find, once a day for 2 minutes, the internal state of someone who naturally inhabits what you desire, and observe from that point, with no agenda for results, no monitoring of whether it's working. Just be the observer who inhabits that frequency for 2 minutes. Before continuing, pause here. Think of something you desire that carries the state of exclusion. Now, for just 30 seconds, place yourself inside the state of someone for whom this is already natural. Don't try to force joy. Just observe. How does this person think? How do they move? How do they perceive the day? Feel the difference between observing from the outside and observing from the inside. That difference, exactly that, is what the observer effect detects. The open loop from Block 4 closes here. Moving from exclusion to inclusion is not an affirmation you try to believe. It is a shift in the point of observation that you practice, from outside to inside, from destination to state, from the one who desires to the one who inhabits. And the field responds to the point of observation, not to the intensity of desire. This resolves the positioning of implicit exclusion. But there is a deeper layer that determines whether this state of inclusion will consolidate as your default state of observation, or remain a practice you do, and then lose. This layer is where the individual meets the universal, and where the observer realizes they were never alone in the mechanism they use. Comment now. I observe from within. Not as a technique you are learning, but as a declaration of the point of observation you choose to inhabit from this moment on. The observer effect begins with a declaration of identity. And this deeper layer, it is where everything you've learned either becomes permanent or disappears within days. You are not discovering a new mechanism. You are arriving through your own path at the same realization reached before you by traditions and thinkers who didn't have the language of quantum physics, but who described the same mechanism with a precision that retroactively confirms what modern science has discovered. The Hermeticists of ancient Egypt, whose tradition survives through the Corpus Hermeticum, taught the principle of mentalism. The universe is mental. Not in the sense that it is illusory, but in the sense that mind, consciousness, is the substrate from which reality emerges. As within, so without, is not a statement about positive thinking. It is a description of the mechanism by which the internal observer determines what the external observer encounters. William James, the American psychologist who founded pragmatism and spent decades studying religious experience and states of consciousness, documented something he called the each-moment quality of attention. The quality of attention in each moment as the determining factor of the quality of the experience that attention creates. Not the content of thoughts, the quality of the one who thinks. He wrote about this at the end of the 19th century with no reference to quantum physics, arriving at the same conclusion through experimental psychology. The Dzogchen tradition of Buddhism, one of the oldest and most preserved in human history, teaches that the nature of mind in its purest state is Rigpa, luminous presence that perceives without being colored by what it perceives. Not a mind that controls what it observes, but a mind that observes with such clarity and transparency that the field responds to the quality of its presence rather than to the forced direction of its attention. And the physicist Werner Heisenberg, one of the founders of quantum mechanics, said something that official physics rarely emphasizes because of its implications. What we observe is not nature itself, but nature exposed to our method of questioning. In other words, what you find in reality is not independent of how you approach it. The quality of the observer and the method of observation are part of the result. Egyptian Hermeticism, William James, Tibetan Dzogchen, Werner Heisenberg, all pointing to the same conclusion. The observer's consciousness is not an irrelevant detail in the equation of reality. It is one of the determining variables, and the quality of that consciousness, not the content of your thoughts, but the state of being of the one who thinks, is what the field detects and organizes into lived experience. The unifying statement is this: you are not separate from what you observe. You are in a creative relationship with what you observe, and the nature of that relationship is determined by the quality of the observer you are in each moment. Bringing this directly to you. Every time you tried to change your reality by controlling what you think and didn't get consistent results, you were not proving that the mechanism doesn't work. You were confirming that you were changing the content without changing the state. And the state is what the observer effect reads. The difference between an observer who tries to control what they see and one who changes how they see is the difference between trying to redirect a river by force and changing the slope of the terrain. The second moves more water with a fraction of the effort, because it works with the system's logic instead of against it. Like an antenna that stops forcing the signal and simply tunes itself to the frequency that is already being broadcast, you do not create the reality you desire. You adjust your point of observation until it becomes the only thing your frequency can detect. And when you embody this, not as an idea, but as identity, something shifts that cannot be undone. You are no longer someone who watches your life waiting for it to improve. You are someone who has recognized that you are the active observer collapsing possibilities into reality at every moment. Not through the force of thought, but through the quality of the state from which you observe. And this recognition, when it is real and not merely intellectual, has already begun to reorganize the point of observation you use as your default. You are already the conscious observer the moment you stop operating as an unconscious spectator. You will not become more powerful with more practice. You will not gain control when you master more techniques. You already are the mechanism, the observer collapsing reality, now, in this state, in this moment. What changes is not what you become. It is the level of consciousness from which you operate what you have always been. We are those who choose to observe from within instead of from without, who choose the state of inclusion instead of exclusion, who know, not as theory, but as a stance they are practicing right now. That reality does not happen to them. It emerges through them, from the level of consciousness they inhabit when they observe. Don't subscribe to the channel. Subscribe to this frequency of conscious observation, the frequency of those who know that what they look at with attention begins to exist differently. You who have come this far are no longer the spectator of your own life. It is the observer who collapses it, who always has been, but now knows that it is, and that knowing completely changes how you will enter each next moment. Because every moment now carries the weight of this awareness. What are you collapsing with the quality of your observation right now? The synthesis is paradoxical, like every truth worth the cost of finding it. You do not control reality by thinking. You create it by being. And the being you are when you observe is the only factor the observer effect reads as a real signal. Comment the word observer below, not as a title you are adopting, but as a recognition of what you have always been, and now know you are. The field reads the declaration of identity. That declaration is already the observer effect in action. You have learned to operate as a conscious observer. But there is a layer beyond observation. The layer where the observer and the observed begin to dissolve into such an integrated relationship that the separation between who creates and what is created stops making sense. In the next video, I will show why every conscious observer who does not make this dissolution still carries a distance that limits what can be collapsed, and how that distance disappears. What you observe with clarity, you create.